All right, welcome to another episode of the Scripting Them podcast, the show where I put my 20 years of experience to the test and try to use it to give you some sort of advice. So today I want to cover how to properly include AI into your dev or your or your dev team's workflow. We're gonna talk about some kind of why you would want to do that, and then kind of some tips and things to look out for when doing that. So let's go. All right. So the first thing that I wanted to cover is kind of why are we talking about using AI? Won't that take our job? And the answer to that question is actually in one of the first episodes of this show. So go check it out. I'll leave a link in the show notes for this episode to that one, so that you can see so that you can hear everything I have to say about that. But essentially, the short version of it is, no, AI is not here to take our job as devs. It's actually here to help us enhance it and be better devs. So definitely don't shy away from it. There is a lot of good that can come if you properly integrate it into your workflow. So let's talk about that. So why then? Why would you want to include AI, or specifically, let's just make sure that we're on the same page. We're talking about LLMs. I'm not talking about some other prediction or forecasting algorithm or anything like that. I'm specifically talking about LLMs, and the LLMs that are readily available either as an open source option or as a paid product. So why would you want to include that into your dev workflow? The main reason is speed. Again, we're not here talking about letting the LLM do all the coding and you just sit back and do some prompting and that's it. Although we've seen some online, maybe you've heard about Cursor, for example, Cursor.ai. They have a very interesting product apparently, which you can just talk to and it'll create an app for you. We're not talking about that. That I don't think that it's gonna work 100% of the time. You still will have to code. You still will have to deep dive into the code, into algorithms, and understand how to properly implement something. It depends obviously on the type of industry you work in, the type of clients you have. But the work of a dev is still needed. That said, it doesn't mean that the AI cannot help you do what you do, but faster, essentially. There are ways in which you can ask for like an initial draft or the skeleton code for the template, even for a specific solution, for a specific algorithm, and then you can fill in the blanks. You can give it the entire context, and it can give you an initial potential solution that you can just fine tune. You can even ask it for like tech decisions or architectural decisions. You can ask it for feedback on specific piece of code and to look for clear and obvious mistakes that you can that maybe you're missing on the code. There are many ways in which you can use it to be faster and to produce code faster, essentially becoming that unicorn of a developer that people call it the 10x developer. I think that with a proper workflow including AI, you can definitely become 10 times more efficient and more proficient, essentially, as a developer. But again, there are a lot of other things that need to happen on a company side as well, and in your team specifically, so that you can actually, become that 10x developer. That said, that is one of the reasons why you want to do it. Another reason is because through AI, through this LLM, you get access to understanding and to potentially implementing code that you wouldn't normally be comfortable working on. So let's put an example. Let's say you've been working for years as a front-end developer, and so you understand JavaScript, you know your front-end frameworks, you know all the rules, your UX. You have some even design skills. So you're a great front-end developer, but you've never really done any backend. You kind of understand how it should work, but you've never done it. Now, through AI, through a tool like an LLM, you can access that extended knowledge. You can create a backend asking it for your understanding of what it needs to do, and then fill in the blanks. You can even keep asking questions about why is it implemented that way, or what should you implement next, and then it can guide you through the process. So essentially what I'm trying to say here is that, and we've seen it online many times as well, many developers are now trying to access areas or industries or just sections of an application that they would have never been involved in, thanks to AI, thanks to the potential knowledge that is there. And you can ask questions, keep asking dumb questions, keep being repetitive about the things that you don't understand, and ask it to explain it in different ways. Essentially, it's like a colleague sitting next to you that never gets tired of your questions, essentially. And you can really ask very basic ones and very more complex ones as well, with the current state of LLMs, explaining what things you should be working on, or how in theory the backend, for example, should work, or how a game engine should work, things like that. Those are definitely things that you can ask. Obviously, once it gets to the nitty-gritty of giving you code and the implementation, that's where hallucinations come in, or can appear, and then the result obviously will not be ideal. But we're not talking about that yet. We're talking about using about reasons why you want to use it, and this is one of them. Again, going back to that 10x developer that can put out code much faster than the others. This is not just about putting a lot of code out. It's also about being able to work on more things, or being able to be that one-man orchestra, essentially. Clearly, I'm not saying developers should from now on start working on their own for a full-blown application. Clearly, there are specializations that are still needed, but at least through AI, you now have access to areas that you wouldn't normally have access to, or even you wouldn't normally want to get involved with because you're just not comfortable there. Now you have the tools that will let you be comfortable, and that will even allow you to learn how it works a lot faster. So definitely another reason why you want to include something like an LLM into your workflow. And I think that the final kind of reason why you as a developer would want to include this into your workflow, it's kind of related to the previous one. It's not just that you now have access to areas where you wouldn't normally be involved with, but you also have the ability to be upskilled or even onboarded into a framework or a way of working much faster. Think about the documentation process. Think about maybe joining a new team. They have their own company specific framework. They document it extensively, but now you have to go through the entire thing, really understand how it works, ask questions, and try to get people to explain it in a way that you understand it. Through LLMs, through AI, you can actually just ask questions to that documentation. You could potentially be asking questions to the documentation and getting the specific answer that you need to solve the problem that you want to solve. So it's not about you having to think less, it's just you having the answer much faster because it's a direct answer to the question that you're asking. It's not you having to read the whole thing and then figure out the question and then figure out the answer. It's a much faster way to get what you want. So again, there are many benefits to as a developer to include an AI into your workflow, and as a team or even a company, obviously including AI into your devs workflow is also beneficial because again they are working much faster, so they produce more code faster, which means you get to deliver a product in less time. You get potentially, if it's done well, you get higher quality products. If it's done well, if it's properly integrated into the dev's workflow, it's not that you need the less people overall, but rather you have the more potential to work on more products at the same time. If you're a company that provides a service to other companies, then you have more efficient developers that now can work on multiple things at the same time, essentially. Or you can split your teams in a more intelligent way, or you can split your teams in a way that you're able to work in parallel in more projects, essentially. So definitely there are benefits there. Obviously, if you from the economics point of view as well, if you have people that are able to work on multiple things, so you have the ability to use more people on more projects, then essentially you're kind of reducing costs because you have these, I don't want to call them 10x developers anymore. This will be the new baseline, essentially. Once every company, every team, every developer includes AI into their workflow as a mandatory, as a base resource for working, then we're all gonna be 10x, what we consider 10x right now. So the baseline of performance of proficiency is going to increase tenfold. That means that from a resource or from a costs point of view, you're going to reduce, companies are going to reduce them potentially also tenfold. So that's definitely why so many companies, big ones, are focusing so much on improving this process, on pushing their teams into including AI into their workflow. Is not an evil thing. It's just that, for you as a developer, it makes a lot of sense, but for them, from the economics point of view as well. So, and if you think about like including the next step of LLMs, which would be like agents, where multiple LLMs are working together to solve a single problem, then you jump into the next level. Even you have the potential of these agents, these assistants, to write code, test it, run it for you, even deploy for you. So you're going to be doing less manual work and more theoretical work, for example, and more reviewing as well. So definitely there are benefits for both sides, and this is why we should all be talking about how to properly implement AI into our devs workflow, and not whether we should or shouldn't we. Now, the question comes, now that we kind of got that out of the way and we understand why and whether we should or shouldn't implement AI here, the question is, how do we do it properly? Is it just like giving everyone a Copilot account and that's it, we're done? Is it just giving your devs access to ChatGPT and then forgetting about it and letting them use it freely? Or are there considerations that as a company or as devs we should be taking care of, or even looking into, to make sure that we are doing this the proper way? And there are considerations, there are some tips, some best practices that the industry is creating as we go. But the main thing that it was already a problem from the get-go with these type of solutions, and that we're trying to figure out how to best make it work, especially thanks to open source as well, is privacy and security. That I think that is one of the main problems, one of the main concerns that companies and developers and even clients should be looking into and should be taking into account. So LLMs obviously are not the problem. The problem is the companies behind them, essentially. I'm not here saying every AI company is evil or anything. What I'm saying is that many companies and are openly saying and are very open about the fact that they will use your interactions with these LLMs to train the next version of that LLM. So OpenAI was one of the first, obviously, and it has always been clear about the fact that all your interactions are being used for training the next version. Now, obviously, you do have the option to opt out of that process, but there are other tools that make it very less obvious, or even don't have that option. So Copilot, for example, again, is known for also using that code or even publicly available code to train their models. Is that a problem? Not necessarily, but if you're using Copilot with proprietary code, then it becomes a problem, right? Because you're giving other companies access to your code. Are they using it properly? Are they just using it to train something that will never return the specific solution that you created? You cannot ensure that, and that is the main problem. That's one of the main problems, actually. The other one is that you're just taking code potentially out of the network of your company, or even out of the region the code should be in. So remember that there are many layers to these security and privacy and compliance aspects. One of them is obviously you sharing code that is proprietary with another company. So whether you're working for another client through your company, or maybe you're just working for a product for your company. There is a contract that you sign, and there is a contract that potentially your company signed with their client that specifically says that the code cannot be shared with anyone. And that is exactly what you're doing. So that is something that needs to be solved at a contract level. Legal departments have to be involved here to make sure that what you're doing is legal. Otherwise, you're breaking agreements, and you're creating a huge problem for your company. So one of these layers is make sure that you are in agreement and in compliance with whatever contract has been signed. Now, another layer here, for example, is many regions in the world will not let you take content or data out of that region. If it is created inside the region, it can never leave it. And in that situation, in that context, if you're using, for example, Copilot sending data out of that region, then you're potentially breaking another agreement. Your company through you is not in compliance with whatever you're doing, with whatever agreement they were in. So again, that could translate into you losing your job. It could translate into the company losing a big client, or even infringing some sort of regulatory law. So keep in mind, obviously, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have all the details about that, but definitely it is a problem that you should look into, and it is a question that you should be asking either your team lead, either the engineering manager, or someone else up above that. But that question of whether commercially available AI products can be used. That's Copilot, that's OpenAI, ChatGPT, whatever product you want to use. If you're paying to another company and you're sharing your content, your documentation, or your code with them through that LLM, it is something that you need to look into. That's why open source LLMs are a great alternative option, and are equally, or even in some situations, even better suited for what you need to do. So consider that there are a lot of options out there that are ready for you to just run LLMs locally with just a few clicks. You have LM Studio, you have Olama, you have GPT for all. There are many options. I will leave some links in the show notes for you to check out if you haven't really. But just keep in mind that there are some of the top models out there are open source. Meta has their own model open source and being updated regularly. There is one that is coming from European organizations as well. So if you want to use specific ones, or if you want to avoid biases, there are many options out there, and some of them are tailored for specific needs. Some of them are easier for you to fine-tune them to implement RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, which allows you to feed it documentation, feed it code, and then use that as context for whatever it creates later. There are many ways in which you can do all of that without the need to either pay or just use an external company for that. You can just read in a little bit, set up the entire service that will let you code faster, be much efficient, and so on as a developer, without infringing or breaking any regulatory laws. So what I'm saying here is keep in mind security and privacy of your code and the information that you share with them. And if it is a problem, which probably will be, especially the company is big, or the client that you're working for is quite big, then potentially a local or a local version of that solution will definitely be something that you want to look into. And that doesn't really mean just running the LLM in your computer, because the computer needs to have hardware that as developers we don't always have access to. But you can definitely set up a cloud server that is secure enough and compliant with all the networking issues, networking configurations and security configurations, and whatever your client needs to be to make sure that everything's safe, and then use that as a service. If you have a security department, if you have a networking department, maybe get them involved as well. But the point is here that from a technical point of view, the biggest regulations, the biggest legal problems that you can run into should not be a showstopper here. You can definitely work with them and still have everything you need to be this 10x developer through AI. Now the other thing that I think is like second in importance when it comes to using or implementing AI into a dev's workflow is to make sure that your devs are properly trained on understanding or have the right expectations when it comes to using these LLMs. So even though we've had this technology for a few years already, it's still very, very new. It's still relatively new, and because it's so new, because it's so some devs have not really given it a try, have not really given it enough of, have not really shown enough interest in it to understand its potential and its limitations as well. So what I'm trying to say here is that when developers are going to interact with this tool, they need to understand what it can do and what it cannot do. So they have to understand that it is not a magic black box that they can just ask for solutions and they will always get the right solution and they just copy paste and send it to production. That is not how these things works. And if you treat it that way, you're just going to be frustrated with the interaction that you get back, with the type of results that you get, and you're just going to say, this is just wasting my time. I can't really work with this because I need to rewrite the whole thing. That's not how you use it. That's not why you're using it, and that's and you're just missing the potential there. You're missing that all the reasons why I mentioned previously that you want to include it. So training, I think it's crucial so that your developers can actually get the most out of it. So essentially it's understanding how to prompt it, understanding how to ask for questions, understanding how to ask questions, understanding how to ask for information, or even how to ask it to generate code that makes sense. If your devs, if your team knows how to properly use the tool, then they will get the most out of it, and they will definitely see that benefits that improve in performance, in proficiency, essentially. Another thing that you should look into as devs is just everything outside of the process of code generation. Everything outside the process of code generation. LLMs do a decent job, and some models are great at code generation, but that's not the only thing that you can do with them. That's not the only way you can use them. And these are just a few examples, but asking it for an algorithm, essentially, to explain it to you, to give you pointers, or to give you like steps that need to happen, that you need to implement, that you need to go through, so that you don't miss anything. Again, as I mentioned before, like chatting with documentation, giving it the documentation for your library, for example, and asking it questions, or how do I do this, or what kind of methods can I use, or why isn't this working? And it will give you updated information on the latest version of the documentation, and it will give you the answer on what you're doing wrong, how you can improve, or how you can fix a problem that you have in your code. You can even ask it to explain to you a piece of code. Maybe you're dealing with legacy code that is undocumented. A great way to add some sort of documentation to this code is for you to read it and just explain it to you. And you can then copy paste that explanation. But again, this is only if you can share that code with this LLM. So everything is tied together. But the point here is that LLMs in the dev workflow go way beyond just code completion. That is just one tool, and in my opinion, the least important one, because through all the other interactions, you can gain so much more than you can just use when you start writing code. And then definitely code completion will make you potentially write faster code, but there is so much more that you can use it for. And then again, as I was mentioning, RAG and fine-tuning are options that you can have with these LLMs, especially again if you're using local versions that you have more freedom on what kind of information you can share with them. You can just give it your entire code base, for example. If you're implementing AI into a large code base, a great idea is to just give it the entire code base and use either fine-tuning or just RAG to ask questions about it, or to just create functions or extend the code that it already knows. So remember that LLMs, the way they work, their knowledge, essentially their base knowledge, is cut off at the time of training. They are trained with a limited amount of knowledge, and they cannot be retrained essentially by you. But you can definitely use either RAG as a technique or fine-tuning. They are both different in the way they work and in kind of the quality of the results that you want, but RAG is something that is a lot easier to implement and it's a lot faster as well, and it will give decent results. So let's say it's I think that the most common way in which RAG is being used is to feed it documentation, to feed it PDFs with manuals or whatever, that you, instead of reading 100 pages of manual, you can just give it to LLM and then ask it the direct question that you want, and it will use that information immediately to answer the question. You have to be creative about what kind of information you give it and what kind of questions you ask it, but there's a lot of potential there. So again, if you're thinking about having your own project-specific LLM, which I think it's a very good idea, because by fine-tuning or even using RAG on one of these tools with specific content about one project, that context are just closed, or everything closed around that, it will become a very knowledgeable tool that everyone can ask questions, from the junior developer just joining your team and just not understanding anything about the code base or how the project works or anything, to the most senior person in your team, trying to understand if the client asked for something specific, or if this has been done already as part of the code. There are many things that can be done with that LLM if you give it more context. So again, think about the option of fine-tuning it or using RAG with these tools. And finally, I think that I don't know if it's the most important, but I think we should always remember this, and it's to never take the humans out of the whole loop, right? These tools are still far from being able to work without human intervention at all. We are seeing a lot of examples right now. If you go online, you'll see a lot of examples of people developing whole applications without writing a single line of code. Definitely that is an option. Definitely that can happen. And that seems to be a trend in the industry that is growing, but not every project is going to be that ideal for that right now. We're seeing examples, especially in the web space, in the web dev space, where there is so much examples out there, there is so much documentation that these LLMs are able to create a lot of things, just from your descriptions. But if you go into industries that are a little bit more closed or just not as documented, then the results are not going to be ideal. So essentially what I'm trying to say here is that these tools are fantastic and they will make you a better developer, but they are not ready to be the developer. So as a company that is looking to implement AI into a dev workflow, you should always remember that you need devs in your team to review the code that is being created, to understand whether it's valid to be pushed into production, to be responsible also for making that call. You can't really go to a client and say, well, this doesn't really work because the AI decided this was the best option to push and it was wrong. That's never going to be a valid option, so a valid response. So you do need someone to validate, to vet the code and make sure that it's valid, that it's production ready, that everything around the software development life cycle was properly implemented, and that there were no hallucinations there that are going to just break production when it deploys. This is not a human replacement. This is a human enhancement that definitely you need to implement if you want your dev teams to be working better, but not to replace them. The key takeaway here from this entire episode, or for the entire topic of whether we should or we should not be implementing AI into a dev's workflow. LLMs are fantastic tools, and I will never not say it, for developers and for many other industries as well. But specifically in the case of software development, they are fantastic tools, and they should absolutely be integrated as a base tool for all software developers. But it is not meant to be here as a replacement. It is here as another tool that will make you more proficient. Just like integrated documentation in your IDE, or a lightweight IDE that works a lot faster and has an incredible intelligence. We were talking about that probably like 4 years ago. Now we're talking about integrating LLMs into that tool, but we're not saying developers are gone or are going to be replaced. All we're saying is that this tool, instead of fearing it, we should embrace it, and we should use it to its full potential to make us better developers. That's all. So that's it. That's the end of the episode. So if you're just going to close the video, close the podcast app, and remember anything, just remember that these tools, LLMs, are fantastic, and you should be looking into using them as a developer. Or if you're a company, if you're an engineering manager and your team is not yet using LLMs in their workflow, you should look into implementing them as part of another tool set, as part of another tool on their workflow. Just keep in mind privacy and security, both for your company and your client. Keep in mind that your devs need to be trained on how to use this tool. This is, even though there is a human interface with these people, with these tools, essentially, you can just talk to them. They're not smart enough to fully understand what we want. So you still need to know how to prompt it properly to get the most out of them. Look outside code completion. This is not just a code completion tool. This is not Intelligence Plus. This is much more than that. And the minute you understand that and you implement it, the entire workflow for your developers is going to be enhanced incredibly. Consider fine-tuning and using RAG, especially if you can have your own open source LLM solution in a secure environment. That you can just, it'll be safe, so you can just throw and share as much information as you want out of the project, out of your client. Then definitely look into these two techniques, because they will improve even further the type of things that you can do with this with LLM. And finally, again, remember, this is not here to replace your devs. It's not here to make you help you save money by firing people. This is here to help you make more money as a company, because you'll be able to work on more projects at the same time. And as a developer, this is not here to replace you. This is here to this is just another tool that will make you much better developer and much faster. Just keep in mind that as every other tool, you have to learn how to use it. And you still need your basics around software development. You still need to know that, because you will need to validate and vet all the content that this tool is going to give you. That's still going to be part of the game. So that's it. That's the episode. Thank you for listening or watching if you're in YouTube. I hope you found it interesting, as always. And until the next episode, keep coding using AI, and I'll see you in the next one. And that was it for this episode of the Scripting Them podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you can find me online on Twitter at TheLeadMan123, and you can also find the podcast YouTube channel just searching for the Scripting Them on YouTube. Thank you again, and catch you on the next one.